What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we are looking at the basic principles and the common concepts within Wicca. I know that the thumbnail says Coven laws. I can get into my specific ones, but that probably won't be until next month. I'll look at those. Actually, no, that won't be till the new year, because beginning of next month is Samhain, and end of the month after that is Yule, so I won't get a chance to until next year. Holiday season, am I right? Anyway, there's an old saying that if you ask any 10 Wiccans about their spiritual beliefs, you'll get at least 15 different answers, which isn't far from the truth because of the thousands of people that practice Wicca. There are thousands of different Wiccan groups in existence, and there's no one governing body over all of Wicca. We don't have a Pope and a Vatican City. There is no Wiccan Bible that lays down our commandments that we must live by. And while the specific practices of one group might be completely different to another, there are a few ideals and beliefs that connect them both and make them both Wiccan covens. And that's what we're going to look at today. We also need to keep in mind as we go into this that not all people who identify as pagan are Wiccan, and that not all pagan traditions have the same set of principles as the core beliefs of Wicca. Now, I will leave the link below if you want to read this. I'm going to skip over a couple of bits, like the origin. The origin's not hugely important here. The calling upon the divine bit and the initiation and degrees system, I'm going to skip over as well. Yeah, cool. We're going to start with what this article is calling magic happens. A couple little paragraphs here. So the belief in and use of magic and spell work is nearly universal within Wicca. This is because for most Wiccans, magic is not a supernatural phenomenon. It's not witchcraft as such. Instead, Wiccans view magic as the harnessing and redirection of natural energy to effect change in the world around us. You might hear a whole heap of like New Age metaphysical people talking about manifestation. That's just one aspect of magic in this case. So in Wicca, magic is simply another tool or another skill set that you can possess, and most Wiccans use specific tools when spellcrafting. Now these can include the four most common tools, which are essentially your suits in tarot. You will have a cup or a chalice or a goblet or something that holds liquid. Could even be a cauldron. You will have a wand. You will have a small knife known as an athame, and you will have a coin or a talisman, usually with the pentacle on it, which is that 5-pointed star within a circle. That is the full pentacle symbol. The pentagram is just the star without a circle. For those wondering, other tools that you might commonly see used are herbs, depending on what spell it is you're creating, certain crystals, depending on what the intention is, as well as candles. There may even be set up on the altar. You may even have other things to represent the elements, like a feather for air or a shell for water. You might have certain rune stones laid about. Tarot cards might get used. There's a whole bunch of different things, little figurines of deities being invoked, set at the four corners of the altar. Yeah, there's a whole number of things that you might find. Magical workings are often performed within a sacred circle. Now, in a group setting, you may actually make the circle by standing in a circle with the ritual being performed in the center. For a solo practitioner like myself, you may actually turn a whole room into the altar and have, your four corners of the room being symbolized with a particular deity and a particular element, particular direction, etc. So, like, for me, the sun rises through my window, so I know that's east, so that's west. So I'm currently facing south, you guys are currently facing north. For instance, and I might use the walls as put things in certain places to represent the elements. The use of magic is also not limited solely to the priesthood. Within Wicca, anyone is allowed to craft and perform a spell with a little bit of practice, and obviously it's going to take practice to make the spell work as intended. We will get into a second. There is actually a particular bit lower down on this article that shows you that you don't really need to be worried about negative repercussions of a spell going wrong while you're practicing it. And I will explain when we get to that point. In some magical traditions, there are guidelines as to how and why magic should be performed. For instance, some Wiccans adhere to the law of threefold turn, which is essentially karma. It is different in a lot of ways, but it is essentially at the core of it the same idea of whatever energy you put out will come back to you. And others may follow the Wiccan Rede, which simply states, if it harms none, do as you will, and is the Wiccan Rede primarily, as well as a little bit of the Threefold Law as well. That will sort of encourage you not to practice harmful magic. So we're not wanting to create a spell designed to hurt somebody, because obviously if that spell goes bad while you're trying to practice it, that somebody could end up being yourself, and you will just attract a whole heap of negative energy, and we don't want that. So it's smart not to practice those spells. We don't want that, because if you're already getting bad luck from a bad luck spell, even if you get it right, you've already got bad luck, so it's gonna just be your own luck that the spell will backfire on you anyway, because you've already attracted bad luck while practicing. If that makes sense. Like, the spell will work eventually, but it'll probably end up targeting you. However, that's not the Threefold Law and the Wiccan Rede are not necessarily universal. So if you end up being part of a group or a coven that doesn't mandate those things, you can opt to follow them. Magic can be incorporated into rituals for the Sabbats, or they can be used as a standalone practice in and of themselves. So for instance, drawing your daily tarot card is in and of itself a magical practice, but it doesn't have to be a whole big ritual every morning. It can simply just be shuffle the deck real quick, top card, that's how your day's going. Cool. The concept of an afterlife is also fairly typical in most branches of Wicca, and there's generally a willingness to accept interaction with the spirit world. And while seances and contact with the dead is not an uncommon thing, not all Wiccans actively seek communication with the dead. I know my story time earlier this month was about a time when some friends misused a Ouija board. And while I can't explain how, I can explain how they attracted a dark spirit, but you cannot be haunted or possessed because of Ouija boards. If you are smart and use them properly, which obviously my friend didn't, and it's usually because of that, I would be interested in learning how to use one properly before actually getting one. But yeah, for the moment, while I'm still sort of very, very casually looking at a whole bunch of different things within my own practice, I have come across a couple of things, so it's like, okay, I know sort of the basis of it, but if someone was to ask me right now, what is the proper way to use one, I wouldn't be able to answer the question, because I just don't know without looking it up. Divination is another big thing, so obviously tarot cards, rune stones, astrology of all kinds, all things that I have. I've shown you guys both my tarot decks. I have a set of rune stones, obviously pretty well versed in astrology. This little paragraph finishes by saying, so whether you're holding a seance or dumb supper or simply trying to identify and find your spirit guide, it's commonly accepted that the dead and other entities are out there and can be reached through various methods of communication. Alright, now for the closest part that this article comes to what's been promised in the title, the basic beliefs of Wicca. So we have the divine in nature, where most Wiccans believe that the divine, the higher power essentially exists within all natural things, and so nature should be honoured and respected, whether that be animals or plants and trees or rocks. They're all elements of the sacred. You'll also find that many practicing Wiccans are quite passionate about the environment. Just ask my 4-stage recycling system in the corner of my bedroom, for instance. In addition, the divine has polarity, both male and female, both hot and cold, both light and day, light and dark, starts with a D, other word though. north and south, hot and cold, wet and dry, whichever way around you can look at it. There's polarities of all sorts. But on the note of polarity, it does mean that in most parts of Wicca, both a god and a goddess are honoured. You are not limited to one of each, however. If you want to, so for instance, within my utilisation of the Tuatha Dé Danann from Celtic and Irish mythology, on Lunasa, which comes between the summer solstice and the spring equinox. In other traditions, that might be seen as and the autumn solstice. That might be seen as a harvest festival for some, where bread is like a really big part of it. For me, that's more of a festival of the arts, because the god Lu is also known as the skilled god. He's sort of, essentially, he's just the Celtic male version of Athena. He's a war god, but he's also got arts as one of his things, where Athena is a war goddess, but she's also got wisdom and therefore philosophy, and then weaving and like using a loom and that sort of thing as well. And so therefore textiles is like an art form that she represents. And so for that particular festival, I obviously put Lu at the head of the altar, and then the other 3 points of the compass. He usually sits in the north-facing position, which is fire, because he has the Spear of Lu, and the spears or the wands are the tarot suit that represents fire. So that's why he sits there. And then the other ones will be other gods of artistry, or goddesses of artistry. And so Bridget ends up being one of them, but then Bridget is also the main goddess for Imbolc, like the other end of the year. So you aren't just, but in having said that, the main one for Samhain is the Morrigan, which alone is a triple goddess. So you're not limited to just the one. You can have a whole pantheon at your disposal and simply just invoke the gods and goddesses that you feel best represent how you want to practice and celebrate a particular Sabbat, or the ones that you feel are going to be able to answer, best answer your prayer. You are not limited to just the two. It just means that you aren't limited to only the men or only the women of a pantheon. Because if that were the case, Hermaphroditus in the Greek pantheon would be inaccessible either way anyway, because they are androgynous and non-binary. But the divine is present in all of us. We are all sacred beings, and interaction with the gods is not limited, again, just to the priesthood or a select group of individuals. Karma in the afterlife is another one, which I've already mentioned before. And I think I've mentioned all of this before anyway. I'll read it again, just so that we can be clear on it. For many Wiccans, the idea of karma and an afterlife is a valid one, although the Neo-Wiccan view of karma is very different from the traditional Eastern perspective. What we do in this lifetime will be revisited upon us in the next. Part of this idea of a cosmic payback system is echoed in the law of threefold return. In addition, generally speaking, Wicca does not embrace the concepts of sin, heaven, or hell. There simply is one afterlife, and all who live, when they die, this is where their souls go. And it is in some practices called the Summerland, which, if I didn't know what summer was like in Australia, I'm sure it sounded really peaceful. So yeah, I guess I'm just gonna have to practice burning in hell, because at least that's going to be cooler than an Australian Summerland. Ancestry is another big one. This one does sort of come back to that whole idea of communing with the dead. But our ancestors should be spoken of with honour, because it's not considered out of the ordinary to commune with the spirit world. Many Wiccans feel that their ancestors are watching over them at all times. The holidays are based on the turning of the earth and the cycle of the seasons. If you just Google search Wheel of the Year, you will find plenty of images that show the 8 major Sabbats. So those are our major holidays, and then once a month there is an Esbat as well. Usually it's at the full moon, because the full moon is sort of just like across the board seen as the most powerful one. Chinese New Year is generally a new moon, but the full moon is where you reap the benefits of your manifestations from the previous month. Personal responsibility is another one. Essentially, whether magical or mundane, you must be willing to accept the consequences, good or bad, of your own behaviour and of your own choices. Avoiding causing harm is another one. And so while there are a few different interpretations of what actually constitutes causing harm, or what harm itself actually is, most Wiccans follow the concept that no harm should intentionally be done to another individual, or knowingly be allowed, or like knowingly allowing other people to come to harm through inaction. So you cannot, through action, cause them harm, or through inaction, allow them to come to harm. And then the last one is respect for other beliefs. Wiccan groups generally avoid proselytizing, which is just a big old fancy word for trying to convert you from the religion you already have to ours. In Wicca, practitioners recognize that each individual person, each individual member of a coven even, must find their spiritual path on their own without coercion. So I might come to you and be like, hey, we've read tarot cards a couple of times. You seem pretty interested in Norse runes and Egyptian mythology. Would you like to be part of my, would you like to be initiated into a coven and actually learn more about this? Because obviously through some of the sort of secrecy rules that some covens have, of which mine has one as well, I cannot share knowledge of like the ways and the practices with members outside of the coven, which does mean that I have to, I can't even celebrate, Samhain with my best friend who's also Wiccan. That's mainly because they follow the actual cycles of the season as it is in the Southern Hemisphere. Mine's more following the Northern Hemisphere's cycle. Because I have a very ancestry focused coven. So my coven's three main sort of foundations are heritage or ancestry, identity, and legacy. Now obviously Ancestry is its own whole section on this page where they talk about it quite a bit. Identity is sort of the main focus of all of Wicca. You must come to your own, you must go down your own spiritual path of your own volition and make the choices that you make. And then the legacy comes down to things like caring about the environment, doing divination and meditation to sort of make sure that I'm making the right decisions to leave behind something for future generations that will benefit them in keeping with the harm none rule. And that's basically it. My coven really isn't anything super special. I think its main thing is that I might invoke the Tuatha during Samhain. But if you're practicing Samhain, with me, you are more than allowed to invoke the Olympians or the Egyptian gods or the Esvanir of Norse mythology. Completely, you might even want to invoke Shinto gods. That's fine. If they are the gods that you resonate with, that resonate with you the most, then go for it. I use the Tuatha because I have a lot of Irish and Scottish ancestry. So those are the gods of my ancestors. And being that the country that you lived in is in the Northern Hemisphere, that explains why I follow the certain progression of seasons that I follow. And that's about it. There are the American Council of Witches. I can't even remember how long ago. I think it was like 1877. I'm making a guess there, don't quote me, but that number's coming to mind. Sounds right, but I also don't want to be quoted on it. They have 13 principles that they put in, and if you do read this article, it mentions Gerald Gardner from the 1950s, who I was doing a bit of research today on him, and his Ardanes that he said were from the old religion just seemed to appear out of nowhere when and as they seemed to just suit him best, and even his own high priestess eventually just disassociated with him. They all sort of decided to leave on an amicable level, to like, yep, cool, we're going to continue on our path, and it seems that your path has just deviated from ours, so we wish you luck, but we are no longer on the same path. But I got the general idea that he was just kind of crazy, and he was trying to create a institutionalized Wiccan church, essentially, which goes against the whole idea of what Wicca's supposed to be. But yeah, you can learn a bunch more. There's a whole bunch of little links and stuff throughout this article. Its link will be down below. Again, like I said, I will leave the Wheel of the Year down below. I will also try and leave a link to the actual Ardanes of Gerald Gardner down below. There's 21 of them, I believe. as well as I will try to link the 13 principles from the American Council of Witches as well, just so that you can have a look at some more of what are more specific rules that certain covens will take on. Personally, I see a lot of overlap between all of them, and so they're all written in my Book of Shadows, which I think that is right here. This is my Book of Shadows. We got the Wiccan Read, we got the Threefold Law, we got 1 to 11, 12 and 13, my own moral code, purpose and the mission of my thing, and I was about to start writing the initiation ceremony, but most of this is written on my tablet anyway, so one of these days I will actually finish writing my Book of Shadows. There's going to be whole chapters on divination and runes and the gods and like creation myths and stuff. It's gonna be fun. I enjoy it. And if you have enjoyed this video as well, please give it a thumbs up. If you are new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell as well if you want to be notified when I upload new videos. And yeah, until next time, guys, keep your head screwed on.